Welcome to DevBetter, the show where we discuss engineering and organizational problems we've encountered during our travels as a growing software development consulting firm. In his InfoWorld article, David Linthicum's central thesis is that yes, cloud computing has great potential, but it's also overhyped as a silver bullet to solve all problems. After 15 years of using public cloud offerings, we know that a silver bullet it is not. David writes, "We thought cloud was all about cost savings, but that metric was wrong. We need to put a value on the agility and innovation cloud brings, not just dollars and cents." He goes on to say, "This is why CIOs are still responding to questions focused solely on cost savings when it never was about cost savings. Today, we need to focus on communication and education to determine the actual value of cloud offerings and how they should be utilized within a specific business. A solid case must consider all the values of cloud computing, both hard and soft. This means understanding how to define metrics around the importance of speed to innovation and agility from your business, which will vastly differ from other businesses, even within your industry. That value that cloud computing brings to your enterprise is bespoke, and that bespoke nature results in the dreaded 'it depends' response to questions about potential cloud costs and benefits until someone digs into the soft values. Cloud instances are not magic boxes from which we can conjure oversized profit margins with infrastructure incantations, but implemented wisely, cloud computing can still transform your business and save you money. The primary driver is velocity and flexibility. The cloud provides infinite scale and commoditizes most of the difficulties of running a data center. Programmatic data centers as a service support ephemeral architectures that can scale in and out with need as innovation requires. This is the true power of the cloud, and in this episode, we're going to explore it. All right, today with me, I have David Linthicum. Say hi, David.
Hey. Hi, David.
Hi, David. Pleasure to have you on the show, sir. Chief Cloud Strategy Officer at Deloitte, author of over 15 books, 7,000 published articles, and I believe your newest book, An Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing, which I have and I have read. Fantastic work, sir. Thank you for joining the show.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, and thanks for reading my book.
100%. I love it. So the first thing we want to talk about is cloud, and this is a specific idea that a lot of CIOs, I think, got wrong, despite the fact that they don't want to tell you they got it wrong when it was initially pushed out. And that is that the cloud is all about cost savings, which it isn't. And we've figured that out over the course of the past couple of years with doing analyses of on-prem. And you look at Basecamp and those guys who have put a pretty damning piece of work on the internet talking about how the cloud is not cheaper and never has been cheaper. So I think the first thing we want to dig into is will the cloud reduce my infrastructure costs? And for me, the answer is an obvious no, but I want to get your thoughts on that in the lens of your book and the lens of all the articles that you have written. So that's it. Will the cloud reduce my infrastructure costs?
Yeah, in most cases, it's going to be no. You got to remember, it depends, which is the answer that consultants give, and that's
right.
Normally that's the right answer. But the reality is that if we're going today from on-premise systems into cloud-based systems, it's normally going to be more expensive. You got to remember, the price of hardware things that sit in a data center has come down significantly. I write about this in the book, and cloud costs have remained the same, if not grown. So normally you're going to spend a premium to leverage cloud computing. We can talk about the other soft benefits, but the hard benefits typically are going to be there. It's going to cost more.
Right. And it's going to cost more because Amazon, Azure, Google, all these companies are trying to make money off of these platforms that they're building. And you do win a few interesting things by going cloud and thinking in terms of, let me take my data center and let's just copy it and paste it up into the cloud. You win the shared responsibility model of a lot of these big cloud platforms where they'll manage patching for you. Maybe you save some infrastructure costs because your infra team isn't quite as big and you can shrink them a little bit. But in general, what I've found across the clients that I've worked with, and like you said, David, it does depend, but I've found bar none, it's always going to be more expensive if you view the cloud as simply a data center in the sky, right?
If you're just looking at hard costs, It's going to be more expensive most of the time. I think that's a true that's a true statement. Again, you got the hard benefits and you got the soft benefits. The hard benefits would be cost savings. Typically, you're going to be disappointed, and I wrote about this in my book. It was never about cost savings. This is about looking for other kinds of improvements. And if you're looking for the cost savings, it's just not going to be there, generally speaking.
100%. So in my experience, I've seen a lot of customers, usually when we walk into a client, they have implemented their cloud in probably the most expensive way possible, as opposed to targeting agility and targeting innovation as a centerpiece of why they moved to the cloud in the first place. And usually, again, what we find there is that the CIO has been sold the idea that the cloud reduces your infrastructure costs. As you said in the book, as you've said many times, it's not about that. It's not about ensuring that we're able to get our infrastructure costs down. It is specifically designed, the cloud, in my opinion, to push us towards innovation, which is the next big topic here. So if it's not about money, then what is it about? As an application engineer, for me, there are many items and topics as to why the cloud is great. I want to hear your thoughts on this first, and then let's kind of riff a little bit. If it's not about money, then what is it about?
It's about agility, and it's about innovation. So at the end of the day, we're looking for the technology to adapt quickly around the innovative directions in which we're taking the business. So net new development, greenfield development, all these things that businesses need to do well to stay in the marketplace. Cloud's going to enable that better because we're able to provision the resources that we need at the speed of need. So in other words, if I need a DevOps stack, if I need an artificially intelligent system, I don't have to bring it into my data center, install it, configure it, and then hire a bunch of people to maintain it. I can just leverage it as a service. It's going to be expensive, but that's going to be a faster way. That's going to bring more benefits to me as a business.
For sure. And I think seeing Agile come about in the late 2010s, we had this big Agile transformation boom, which I'm sure you were a part of. Everybody was screaming that Scrum is the way, the truth, and the light. And now DevOps, as a fast follow of that, which is Agile applied to the infrastructure team, now we have the capability with these new tools like Terraform, CloudFormation, ARM templates, like whatever Microsoft or whatever Google uses. We have this capability of spinning up something with little to no cost as quickly as possible. And I think the application infrastructure has come a long way, and that to me has sunset some of these ideas that the cloud is about a lift and shift operation too, right? Because as an application engineer, if I can sit down and write 5 lines of code to spin up an entire stack that I can then go and build out a greenfield POC for my data team, that is something I couldn't do probably 5 or 10 years ago. So for me, that's another big piece of the innovation that you're discussing is we've enabled through this new tooling the application teams to be able to spin things up super fast with no lag time, and we can spin them down. So it's not necessarily even that expensive, because if I'm done with an environment, I click a few buttons and run my Terraform and everything's gone, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, at the end of the day, this is about providing our ability to fail fast, the ability to try things at speed. And we couldn't do that with traditional infrastructure. We had to buy things, install them in a data center. And there was a huge amount of latency involved with that. And there's a huge amount of bureaucracy involved with that. Now we're able to, in essence, have an idea in the morning, spin up that infrastructure around lunchtime, figure out if it's going to work or not, and then put it back to where we found it, and therefore not get billed for it anymore, at the end of the day. And then suddenly we go, okay, well, that didn't work. And we can move on to other things and figure out something that can work. And if you look at the innovations that occurred in the last 20 years, the companies that are most innovative in the marketplace, they take that mentality. They understand that they're going to have to try lots of stuff to get something working. And you can't really plan for that as much. It has to be an iterative, agile process. And that's how creativity works. And so cloud computing enables creativity, enables innovation, because it enables agility.
100%. What are some of the blocking factors that you've run into when you're talking to folks about it's about agility and not cost savings? Like, what are the mental thought processes that some folks go through that lead them to the wrong conclusion, do you think?
Well, the big thing I used to hear until recently was they want the cloud savings to fund the cloud migration. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure there's going to be savings. And if you're doing that, then you're probably not doing this for the right reasons. You don't have the right expectations. So just too much of a focus on the tactical cost saving capabilities of cloud and not necessarily on the other stuff. And so in many instances, I would tell them to leave it where it is, because the reality is that if you move it to cloud, unless you're able to spend a significant amount of investment to improving that infrastructure, it's just going to be more expensive and it's not going to serve you as well. So if you're going to leverage cloud, you have to leverage the cloud native capabilities to bring the most value back to the system. And that requires some very good developers and refactoring of the various systems and a lot of reengineering of the various systems to get you that value. If you're unwilling to spend the money to get there, you're not going to get the value back, either the soft value or the hard value. Don't do it.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's always this tension between the CEO and the CIO, right? With respect to what value am I getting out of this, right? As a CEO, you're always pushing for, how is this driving my business? What does this mean for my bottom line? Is this a good direction? And the CIO also wants to embrace innovation, wants to embrace faster speed to market. But at the same time, there's sort of this healthy tension between those two roles. What are some conversations that you've seen there with respect to adopting the cloud in the lens of, it's not about cost savings?
Well, it's been easier conversations recently because of the rise of generative AI. And so 9 times out of 10, that's going to run in the cloud. They want that capability because they view it as strategic to the business. Whether it is or not, that's another question. So it is really kind of the path to get to that point. And so we can define it as a value play, not as a cost play, because it's not going to cost less. It's going to cost more. Generative AI is a huge pig when it comes to processing, comes to data. So your cloud bills are going to be skyrocketed. So you have to figure out the value in there. So you have to do some creative mathematics, some creative financial planning as to how you define what value comes back to the business. And that's where people need to focus. And so they're kind of agreed upon that. That's where the CIOs and the CEOs kind of have agreement, even the CFOs, which is a tough one. In the past, that wasn't the case. In other words, they had two different expectations. The board of directors and the CEO wanted you to move to cloud because they read in an airline magazine how it was cheaper, better, faster. That's where all the executive facts come from. And so you were called into the office or called in the board meeting, and they told you to get us to cloud ASAP. And that's not necessarily the way you move to cloud in the most inexpensive way. And so they expected cheapness. They expected quick. They expected, a better quality of services and things like that. Some of that stuff came around, but the reality is it came at a price tag they didn't expect. I mean, 2022 was kind of the day of reckoning where everybody who did a quick move into cloud during the pandemic and the years before, they realized suddenly with the surveys that I saw, there was no cost savings to this. In fact, the best I can tell when I did research for the book, people are paying 2.5 times the amount of money they thought they were going to pay for the cloud services than their expectations going in. Now you can figure out who to blame in that, and the bath and napkin stuff wasn't there. We didn't have a good assessment of the cost stuff, but that is something that's show stopping for many businesses. And quite frankly, they started to complain, and rightfully so, about the viability of cloud and the ability for cloud to provide value back to the business based on cost savings alone, which is how they were sold to get into cloud in many instances.
For sure. And I think I have to blame Amazon a little bit for this, even though we love Amazon and we're like huge partners with them. They brought an amazing product to market, but I don't know that anyone really sat down and did all of the math to sort out, is this in fact going to be cheaper? And again, I don't think that Amazon built itself with the idea of this is going to be cheaper. I think they were more focusing on the reason Amazon Web Services works for us internally, because it was an internal product before they started selling it, is that we can get things done fast. We can spin up a brand new application, a brand new supply chain stack within minutes, as opposed to the traditional world where I came from, where I have to make a phone call to an infrastructure guy and then pray I get my machine for staging environments in a week or two, maybe 3. It depends, right? And that speed to market, as you said in the book, and as we've said in this conversation many times, is the killer app for the cloud. And that's the thing I think a lot of people miss, is they're thinking in terms of it is all about cost savings because that's what my board of directors and my CEO are going to listen to. They're not going to listen to innovation as much as I love CEOs. Sometimes they just don't care about that word at all because they're more worried about the strategy of their business and turning a profit. And all those are very interesting and useful things to think about. But for me, that is the killer app for the cloud, is the speed to market, the innovation. How quickly can we get things out? How fast can we build a new stack? How fast can we test an idea out in the market to ensure that we are investing in the right things and our business is headed in the right direction?
That's exactly right. And I think there's some thinking that's coming around to that way of thinking now because we put our hand on the stove and burn ourselves. But, I always told my clients for the last 10 years, I said, you may have gone to cloud for the cost savings, but you're going to stay for the agility and the innovation. And so if you can't find value in that, then there's really kind of no reason for you to make the move and make the investment. And there's other alternatives, managed service providers, there's colos, if you have to shut your data center down, things like that. There's hyperconverged networks, private clouds, those are kind of making a comeback now. Edge computing systems, and lots of things you can do that aren't necessarily going to get you the big bills of cloud computing because, you can't handle the cloud. It's not something that's going to have value for you because you don't have a culture and an expectation ready to find value in that. And that's okay. You can have a traditional business that just relies on more traditional hardware and software, and you're not necessarily want to move to the cloud because you don't want to be innovative. You're not moving to that sort of a culture. You're just looking to produce something in a more efficient way. And that's typically going to be systems that don't exist in the cloud in many instances.
For sure. And I think you mentioned AI as being another, what I think would be a killer app for the cloud, is a huge service, as you said, having so much data, having to train it, I've worked with AI a lot in my career in my graduate degree, and I feel like the biggest problem is training it and finding the data to train it, and you don't want to store that. You don't want to store that locally. You don't want the liability of storing that locally. You don't want to have to train those models and pay for the compute, pay for these giant machines that are required to train these models in any form of interesting time. So I think that's another example of a good killer app, which also points to the fact that, again, services are the key pieces to me of why the cloud sizzles. Lambda, cloud functions, great way to spin up an app super quick. Another thing I think the cloud provided to us as application developers is it produced an architectural pattern that I think nobody expected, and that's the cloud native architectural pattern. You look at 12-factor app, you look at how we Dockerize things now, and Docker, to me, from an application developer perspective, was one of the coolest innovations. It's just a computer in a computer, I get that. But the thing that it enables me to do to run a production-like instance on my local machine is beyond phenomenal. And it's not something I've experienced in my, decade plus of building software across various stacks. And the cloud pushed us towards cloud-native application design, because anytime you do a migration, I'm sure you also recommended this to your clients, anytime you do a migration, you don't just pick that app up and put it in the cloud. That's a bad idea, right? That's going to end in pain and suffering for everyone. Instead, you want to think about, how does this application work in the cloud, given that the cloud is more of a service-oriented platform, right? You're calling into secrets engines that exist on the platform. You're not reading from a local props file. You're not. You're looking at the environment for your secrets. You're not dealing with some of the frustrations that in my lifetime I've dealt with when deploying applications into data centers with humans copying and pasting files in places. So I think that was an unexpected win for me from the application side, is cloud native pushed us all towards building better software, which has been great and fuels further innovation because that cloud native pattern produces software more quickly than the old school patterns.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if you think about it, it evolved, from J2E and distributed objects and the ability to kind of look at this stuff in more of a componentized way and how we were going to orchestrate and run stuff. So the architecture was spot on what the industry needed at the particular time. And you're absolutely right, that probably wouldn't have been developed if it wasn't for the cloud. There's an incentive for the cloud providers to build and invest in this open source software that takes things to the next level. To go a bit better, that kind of an architecture, it's much more easier to move in a federated realm. So as we're starting to leverage cloud computing and multi-cloud, we're able to build applications above the cloud infrastructure, in essence, using the clouds as infrastructure services only. And we're building an application that logically functions above the different cloud providers. And by the way, above our on-premise systems, above edge-based computing, mobile computing, things like that. And that's absolutely something that's going to allow us to bring this whole thing to the next level, because suddenly we're not locked into a particular cloud. We're even not locked into a particular architecture. We're able to run in a pervasive environment. We have the ubiquity of the various processing that are around. We leverage data where it exists. Your point earlier, you should start moving data around to support AI-based projects. And we're getting into sort of a logical understanding of how the architecture needs to exist moving forward, just because of the fact that we have this cloud native foundation, which everybody is using successfully right now.
This video is sponsored by us. To continue our mission of providing valuable educational resources to current and future software engineers and tech professionals, we've officially launched the DevBetter Newsletter. Our monthly newsletter will bring highlights of the tech industry right to your inbox at the end of every month. Within each DevBetter newsletter, you'll find the top tech news stories, job postings that we believe are worth your time, and more importantly, development tips for your ever-growing knowledge base. If you think this is something you'd read, we've left a link in the description for you to subscribe for free. Now let's get back to the video. It's exciting to think about where we're going to be after we've already made a bunch of mistakes, because again, we learn more from mistakes than we ever will from successes. And as we view multi-cloud as a reality, as we view potentially even on-prem data center being programmable, because to me, if you ask me what I want, as an application architect, as an application developer, as a CIO, what do I want? I want the ability to deploy my Docker container using Terraform anywhere. I don't care about if it's Amazon, if it's Google, if it's Azure, if it's my own on-prem data center. Those, to me, is the next step. Something not a lot of people are focusing on because we've been so fixated on the cloud journey right now and getting our applications up into somebody else's computers. To me, the next step that I would like to see us move towards is to have the capability to deploy anywhere, right? Be that in a Kubernetes approach, which I think they've done a really good job of sort of telling the story and giving the narrative that, okay, if you're on K8, you can go anywhere. I can have a K8 cluster in Google, a K8 cluster in Azure, a K8 cluster in Amazon, and an on-prem K8 cluster, and it doesn't matter. I can deploy it anywhere I want. That's a really good story. It's very compelling, and I think it's something we should pay more attention to, because that gets us the freedom to deploy our applications where they make the most sense from a cost-effective perspective, right? If I want to push something up into the cloud, get it done quick, test it out, because I don't really want to worry about having to go through SOC compliance and all this crazy stuff that I have to do for my on-prem data center, great. I can do that, test it, it works, great. Now we go through the long-form process of getting it operationalized, highly available, and deployed in a cost-effective way to my other environments.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, the thing is, we've been talking about in the core thought leadership community about super cloud, meta cloud, and really that's exactly what you're talking about. The ability to have this logical system that runs above the various cloud providers, abstracts those providers, and deals with them as common infrastructure. So they're not tightly coupled to a particular platform. They tightly coupled to an architecture that happens to be pervasive across cloud providers. And I think that's where everything is looking to go. That's where we're going to find more value in cloud. In many instances, we're going to find that running that architecture on the clouds will be cheaper because of the ability to do some tricks and the ability to manage and deploy these things better, and the ability to run them on any number of different hardware platforms based on the economies of scale and what cloud providers are charging. And I think that's something maybe a little scarier for the cloud providers, because they're going to be commoditized in that kind of an arrangement. However, for the application developers and people that are looking to build solutions that are truly scalable and truly innovative, that's where the action is right now. And that's where we're moving up to.
For sure. And I think that's a bit of a warning to the cloud providers that vendor lock is a thing. It always has been a thing. It's not quite as bad, I think, as a lot of folks make it out to be, because, for example, running RDS, I'm still just interacting with a Postgres database, and I can push that to any other provider. Who cares? I can run that locally. When you look at things like Lambda, Global Accelerator, some of Microsoft's machine learning stuff, all the proprietary things that these various providers are bringing up. I think that is another sort of a dark pattern, if you will. Apologies to my Amazon folks. I love you, but it's a bit of a dark pattern to create this system that requires you to use their platforms in order to deploy properly, which is a reason that I don't typically like things like Lambda or Cloud Functions, because it puts me into their world squarely and I can't get out without some cost. What are your thoughts of how we can avoid this, especially when you're talking about that super cloud infrastructure? Because every cloud vendor, and this is all due respect to them, is going to try and find a way to be sticky. That's what they want, right? They want you to hang around. So do you think there's a world where that can coexist beside having cloud freedom?
Yeah, I do, and the reality is too. I don't think they're building that in as a strategy to lock someone in. It's just quicker for them to deploy applications that are built using their own constraints and their own ideas. And since you're binding to their ideas, you're going to be locked into that particular cloud provider. And by the way, multi-cloud doesn't get you away from that. Anytime you leverage an interface or a particular feature on a cloud provider, it's normally going to be proprietary to that provider, because they're not going to want to move into an open standard because it causes latency in building and deploying the system, and then they're not going to get the income from the system. There's a business reason why that exists, and it's not normally nefarious. It's just kind of the way things move. Coming from a product CTO background, I know how that works. But the reality is, if you're architecting a system, that has to be considered as a trade-off. So in other words, there's a reason why you want to leverage serverless infrastructure, a reason why you want to leverage certain purpose-built databases, there's a reason why you want to leverage high-performing computer systems such as quantum-based systems. But understanding that that's going to be a cost of relocation if at some time you need to relocate the systems. And so I always tell people who are taking my architecture class and stuff like that is that we need to think in terms of a logical understanding of what the system needs to do, and not in terms of how we're going to implement it in a particular technology. We get into that too quickly. A lot of architects lead with technology. They lead with AWS and Microsoft and Google and serverless systems, and even some Docker-based stuff. We need to understand logically the problem we're looking to solve, and then try to remove that system from those points of lock-in as much as possible. And you're not going to win every war. Sometimes lock-in is going to be necessary to get to the end state you're looking to get into. But it's never really thought of in terms of the application. People just do it automatically because they view it as a path of least resistance. And there's a cost in the back end that we have to deal with and understand. That doesn't mean you don't do it, but you just understand you're going to have to pay for it some way down the line.
Yeah, I totally agree with that approach as well. So kind of final question here. How do we implement the cloud in a cost-effective manner, given that we know that it's not about cost savings, but there are likely some things we can do to reduce our costs in the cloud? What are some strategies that you've seen and that you teach people that are ways to think about architectures so that you do reap some of that reward alongside the obvious agility and innovation being the key piece?
Yeah, this is a value play. And so when you do the metrics and do the business case, this is not about cost savings. This is about how much value is going to be returned to the business in terms of innovation value, in terms of agility value, in terms of bringing the business to the next level. So this is a strategic decision that needs to be made, not a tactical decision. And that's where people get hung up. They look at this as a cost thing. They look at the budgets, things like that. So I heard get my cloud migration paid for by my savings, and that's never going to happen. So it has to be taken to another realm. This is almost a board level decision, a CEO level decision, even though there's a tough conversations to have, because we're going to make an investment and typically going to spend 3 to 4 times the amount of money on building this system and moving it into the cloud, but we're going to get 50, 60 times the value that comes from an investment that comes back to the business in terms of the innovative asset that we're going to be able to sell in the marketplace, in terms of the better customer experience through our digital transformation. That's going to make us a key player in the marketplace. The ability to push disruptors off because they're trying to disrupt us basically with the same technology. It provides innovation. They're going to out innovate us, and so that really needs to be the realm of the decision, which is a tougher conversation to have. But that's where it has to be. It can't be at the tactical role. You're just going to lose each and every time because you're not going to get to a cheaper space. You're just going to do lift and shift. Which is not going to get you into any better stance. It's going to just make things cost more. and it's going to be difficult to operate. You're going to have more heterogeneity. You're going to have more complexity. You're not going to be happy with the end results. However, if this is a strategic direction where everybody agrees upon that we're moving in this way, we understand the value that's going to come back from this innovative effort to move into the marketplace, then everybody's going to be a winner. And those are typically the companies that are going to be around. I think companies that aren't able to figure that out over the next 10 years are going to have their lunch eaten. They're going to get disrupted. They're going to not keep up with innovation. They're going to not have a viable product in the market, and they're going to have to fall out.
100%. Cool. David, thank you so much for your time, sir. This has been an awesome conversation. I always love talking to you. Incredibly smart guy. Go check out his book, Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing. We'll put a link in the description below. Thank you again, sir. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I hope you guys had a great time. Hope you understand. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below, and we will answer as quickly as we can. And thanks everybody for your time.